This information is particularly beneficial for people who want to consciously develop their personality type. It's also useful for counselors, human resources leaders, trainers, even facilitators. And the benefits of using this is that it's going to allow you to experience your own non-preferred functions, expand your understanding, and increase your individual appreciation. So the goal or the process of type development is to enhance self-understanding and appreciation for others, and ultimately to increase the choices people have as they continue on a developmental path. Let's start with our self-assessment. The first step is really looking at your own path of development and recognizing where you are, what you have experienced, and be able to explore that so that you can see where you want to be. You want to be able to do this by yourself, or maybe you want to include someone that you trust, but be sure that you examine each of the following questions. And when we're looking into the influences on early development of your type development, you want to ask what type preferences were supported and encouraged by the culture you live in or by your family. How did your environment influence your development, and what individual factors were most affected? When looking at the dominant function, how do you see your dominant function operating in your early childhood? Were you supported in the development of your dominant function? And if not, by your family, who did support you? If your preferences were not supported, how did you deal with it? Did you give up on your dominant function or exaggerated it? How did this affect your self-image? How does your dominant function operate at this point in your life? Looking at the auxiliary function, how do you see your auxiliary function operating in your adolescence? And was your preference supported? Who supported your preference, and how did they support you? Did you develop your auxiliary preference later in life? When did that happen, and how did that happen? Let's look at the dominant and auxiliary functions in your present life. Have you really developed that reliable dominant and auxiliary functions to the ability that you can use it in your world? Can you give examples of how you have developed them? Let's look at the other functions. What skills have you developed in your non-preferred functions? Was one of those functions more useful to you than another? Have your environmental influences caused you to develop something unusual for your type, like maybe the use of your tertiary or your less preferred function, the inferior function? If so, in what ways has this been helpful to you? In what ways has it caused strain for you? Which of your functions would you like to focus on in a more conscious way? Remember, it is important in your self-assessment to distinguish between the development of skills in one area and truly understanding the perception and the perspective of your functions. In the course of becoming a successful adult, everyone develops skills in non-preferred areas. Developing these skills may not, however, have led to a really understanding of how they work or how they're associated with each other. Let's look at how we use decision making for our type development. And the experience of being in a non-preferred function helps to really expand somebody's awareness of the function, and it leads to a greater understanding of how the function might be incorporated in the future. The more someone understands how each of the functions work, the greater an individual will have an ability to make effective decisions. Recall that effective decision making requires the appropriate use of all of the mental functions. Sensing is going to be used for noticing and storing relevant data. Intuition is used for generating possibilities and forming the internal images of the future, being future-oriented or future thinking. Thinking is going to be part of implementing logical plans and creating an objective evaluation of the pros and the cons, while feeling is assessing what's important to the people involved and checking to make sure that what's involved matches the values. Individuals tend to focus on tasks associated with their preferred functions, and many times they're going to overlook or even avoid the inferior or less preferred functions. When we look at the inferior functioning experience for growth, we want to realize that some people naturally gravitate toward their preferred functions, and that they can learn a great deal by exploring these less preferred functions. This type model offers two distinct different ways to further conscious development by focusing on underdeveloped functions. The first is going to direct your attention toward the not so positive side of your inferior function. This is going to be the part that's very stressful, right? The second model really introduces activities and perspectives that are going to push you into an area or an experience so that you can feel those non-preferred functions. Everyone experiences times when they feel out of control. They're going to say or do things that they know are extremely destructive. And these are typically very, they occur when those inferior functions are expressed in those negative ways, and they almost feel like an outburst. So according to our MBTI model, these experiences tend to become unconscious or inferior eruptions is what we call these. And they occur most often when people are tired or possibly under stress. And so we want to find ways that we can avoid them. To understand your own inferior functions or your operations and eruptions, you want to really look at how the inferior function is applied and what happens when it is under stress. The inferior function eruptions can really be so painful that people are going to do their best to forget them, but there are positive aspects to them as well. So sometimes you want to sit back and really recognize what your unconscious self is trying to tell you and what you can learn from these eruptions or these disruptions in your personality. Exploring our non-preferred functions. We want to look at and decide how we can do this. So first we want to enter into activities and try out perspectives that are new and have not been part of our life and may even seem to be related to our non-preferred functions. For instance, you might want to find a good role model or a mentor and observe them. Notice how they use a non-preferred or one of your non-preferred functions. It would be their preferred function, correct? But you notice how they use it in a proactive way. Ask somebody with the preferences opposite of yours to be a consultant or a mentor and to help you. Try not to be too ambitious. Think of something simple that you can really commit to and achieve. Choose a time when you're going to be relaxed and not pressured. Remember that stress is going to create a out of control inferior function instead of helping you to develop it. Remember to be patient because personality type takes time and hard work. Don't get discouraged, and remember to have a sense of humor as much as possible.